Welcome, everyone, to the Next Best Picture podcast, where we are talking with Julian Breece, the co-writer of the new film Rustin. Julian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, this is awesome.
I am really excited to talk to you about this film. Rustin was one of my favorites out of the Toronto Film Festival, and it's so great to finally have some acknowledgement of Bayard Rustin in mainstream media. Um, I I wanted to ask you when and or how you first learned about Bayard Rustin and his position in history, because he's still, for so many people, such an unknown quantity.
Well, first, thank you for saying that about the film. Like it's been a decade-long journey. 2013 is when I started on the project. So,
Wow.
I really appreciate hearing that. And I wasn't able to go to Toronto because of the strike. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I first heard about Bayard. I mean, I first learned about Bayard when I was a teenager. I was in high school, but I did not learn about him in high school. Because they were not covering him. He was kind of the invisible man in the civil rights movement. So I learned about him, the same way all teenagers learn about things they're not supposed to on the internet. And I was really coming to terms with the fact that this gay thing is going to stick with me. And I was just looking for examples of positive outcomes for being gay and Black. And Bayard Rustin and James Baldwin were the standouts for me. And, Bayard, just his stature, that famous picture of him with Martin Luther King. I mean, it just blew me away. And even, later learning that Bayard Rustin was Martin Luther King's mentor. So the most famous religious figure, probably next to or after the Pope, Martin Luther King, his mentor was a gay man. So I mean, that was really profound for me as a young person, for sure.
And you said you came onto this project in 2013. Had you ever considered writing about him before that, or was it just when you heard about this project happening?
It's 2013 was an interesting time. I was, out of film school, and I feel like the industry really shifted big time after the financial crash in 2008. And then there was, the strike, but it was really the financial crash. And so all you were seeing were temples. So it was all about, Pirates of the Caribbean, and, Marvel was starting to emerge.
Oh,
And so the first script that I wrote actually was a film about the ballroom scene in New York City, which, famously covered in Paris is Burning, and
yeah.
then the Ryan Murphy series that recently came out. So that was my first script, Ball, and it got into the top 10 of the Nickel. It won some other fancy screenwriting awards, and I thought I was set. I was like, I'm about to be, Aaron Sorkin out here, and absolutely not. That's not what happened. Getting a film made like Ball was, near impossible. Just nobody had money for a feature like that. So the idea of doing a film about Bayard Rustin just wasn't something that I thought was possible for me to pursue. Especially at that time, I was temping on studio lots, doing the storied coffee runs, and sneaking reading scripts. And I even slipped my scripts into the coverage system a couple of times. They're like, "Why are we reading this?" So I learned a lot in that during that time. But when I heard in 2013, I heard that Lance Black was planning to produce a film about Bayard Rustin, and when I heard that, I was all over it. My manager went after it for me, and I wrote a long email to Lance, just explaining to him my passion for the subject matter and my admiration of Bayard and why I'm the right person and it's my calling. And and I got the meeting, and we hit it off. And like I said, like at that time, there were just not a lot of Black writers, and there were just fewer writers in the system, period. But you could count the Black writers who were consistently working on, one, maybe two hands out here. And so even if were films about Black people, centering Black people were not writing them. So, I really give Lance a lot of credit for hiring a Black gay man to write a Black gay man's story.
Absolutely. And it feels sort of very much in the spirit of Bayard Rustin that you two would collaborate on this, since he was so about intersectionality and bringing people together from
Yeah.
across different boundaries. What was that collaboration like, working with Dustin on this script?
I mean, well, I think like at that time, like, I mean, for me, Lance was, he was someone who I looked up to. I mean, I think that all like, queer, writers and filmmakers out here, that moment when he won the Oscar was huge. And, especially with the what he won it for, a story about Harvey Milk. So I think the idea of working with him was, really exciting to me. And, he, is just seeing him at work, he's, it's like he gets up at 7 a.m. in the morning and writes. I'm doing that.
Too early for me.
Very disciplined guy. And and the process, for me was to find the movie. So he really did trust me with that. And I was very eager, so I left my temp job, took money out of the little savings that I had, and moved to New York for 3 months, because I thought that's what researchers do. And but it was good. I was able to do one-on-one interviews. I did about 19 hours of interviews with people who knew Bayard, so people who worked with him on the march and the movie,
Wow.
and Walter Nagel, who was his life partner. Just really gave me incredible insights into him that you just could not read in a book. The kind of insights you need for story.
Did you get 19 hours of interview? That's incredible.
Uh,
Did you have any access to any of his writings when you were writing the screenplay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So there are the Rustin papers are
Mm,
housed in the Library of Congress. So I
okay.
would go into DC, which I'm actually from DC. So yeah, I grew up in DC, like, maybe 10 minutes away from the site of the March on
Oh my
Washington.
gosh.
Yeah. So yeah, his papers are there. They're housed in the Library of Congress. And then his speeches are actually, there's a collection of speeches by him that Michael Long um, has compiled, and the book is what is it? I Must Resist, or We Must Resist. And yeah, I mean, reading his words, hearing his speeches, that was, getting his voice in the script was really important to me. And I mean, Colman pulled it off brilliantly and brought, things to it that,
Hmm.
um, even people who knew him got chills. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That was going to be my very next question, was how difficult was it to capture his voice in through your pen?
Yeah, I have to say, like, in writing, like, there are things that I'm okay at. Like, I think that like capturing character voices is like something that I like to do. I kind of like can a mimic, So I like picking up his cadence, all those things. I obsess over those little things. And in the writing, I'm hearing it, I'm hearing um I'm hearing the rhythm of his voice. And I would say for him, it was Bayard has this kind of uh aristocratic air about him, and he's very distinguished. This and the way that he actually speaks is affected on purpose. So his, like, it's, for him, it's a way to get people's attention. So he uses what he has, like his height, his stature, not that he wants attention or glory, it's to get people to listen to him because of what he believes in. And so getting that down, like, even writing it, that his voice is, has this affectation to it, which, is something that the people who knew him, he told me it was really important. And you see Coleman go in and out of it.
Yeah, it's an incredible performance from Colman Domingo in that part. Just mind blowing how he captures this man, but a large part of that is also the writing that he has to work with. Um, I I'm curious, you go through so many drafts of these things before it eventually gets to filming. What was the most difficult thing for you to cut from the screenplay?
For me, there were flashbacks that, and some of them are still in the film, but from his younger years that I really felt contextualized. I knew early on that the action of the film was going to be the march, like, those months leading up to the march, that frenetic energy of him and his Mission Impossible, I call it. Um, but there's so much interesting about his life. I mean, he's been, an activist, through the 30s, 40s, 50s. And so many of those experiences did inform things that happened during the march. And so there were flashbacks. There's still one from when he was in Tennessee, the bus scene where he gets beaten outside of the bus, which I'm really glad that one is in the film because it really shows what he's all about. He holds is about demonstrating to people what violence brings. Having people look at it. You can't see that if it's violence against violence. So, but then, yeah. So there was some Ashland prison. He was in prison at Ashland um, for demonstrations, and he yeah, so I loved those scenes. I had to cut them, but yeah, I made the choice to cut them at a certain point. You have to like kill your darlings.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said you knew very early on that you wanted to focus on just the lead up to the march and everything. Did you also know early on that that was how you were going to end it with him, cleaning up after everything? Because that seems so perfectly in tune with his ethos of, getting down in the muck and everyone contributing.
Yeah, I think that like for me, when I think I was at this point, I've done a few biographical projects, and I've never been a big fan of cradle to grave stories. Um, as like thinking about the kind of movies I would want to write. I remember Capote really influenced me, really impacted me when I saw it. I just thought it was so elegantly done and just taking that moment in his life. Um, and within that was so much. You could tell the story of who he was as a person, the essence of him, right? But then also tell the story of this moment, this defining moment in his life, and how that, how that molded him. So, I think for me, like biographical, I see it as like a way to really capture the essence of someone. We're doing it's about like a great man. What is the moment where they became great? And so, with the March on Washington, I mean, I feel he had so many tests. This was the biggest test. And there's a personal story to it that, is I feel like this, like I am a research person. I thought I was going to be an academic, and uh not so much. My advisor was like, you should creatively write, which is not what you want to hear when you're, turning your academic. But
Yeah,
yeah. But
very familiar.
yeah. So I love like when you're researching someone, if you can find those moments where you're like, boom, that is cinematic. That's a movie, because you don't want to just look, every movie is a fiction, even documentary. Documentarians don't like to admit that, but If you can find those true moments that feel cinematic, like that was the clear ending. Like Bayard, he couldn't go to the White House with the leadership, but for him, that wasn't the win. The win, like he won when that march was pulled off, and for him, just going and picking up trash, that was, you know, that was enough for him. That's all he needed. I thought it's a really powerful statement about him, and that's true. I didn't have to make it up. It was gifted to me. Those things that are gifted to you in biographical,
Yeah.
nothing close.
It's true. Sometimes you just gotta give you what history gives you. It's just perfect.
Right.
We're coming up on the end of our time together, but I wanted to ask before we go, because um, I feel like the world has in some ways taken a few steps forward since Bayard's time, and in some ways it's taken a few steps backward. Um, and I want, you've spent so much time with this project, immersing yourself in his life. What is the best way, do you think, for those viewers who are really touched by this film to follow in Bayard Rustin's footsteps and honor his memory?
Yeah, I think there are so many divisions right now. There are, on all sides of the issues that we're seeing, the rollbacks that we're seeing right now, the book bans in Texas. When do we think, we would ever see book bans happening? I'm sorry, in Florida. And you know, the laws that are changing in different states, that are, rollbacks from the progress that we've seen, the homophobic violence, trans violence that we're seeing throughout the country. Um, I think that with Bayard, everyone's angry. Bayard was a gentle person. He believed in, being gentle. The nonviolent philosophy, he lived it. Everyone who knew him says that. And I think that if we could just take a step back and, really see things from the other side, people are scared. It's irrational in a lot of instances, but people are scared. And, we're not communicating with each other in ways that are impactful. And sometimes that way that is stillness. Sometimes that way is like speaking in a way that is, empathetic and, trying to provide like information as opposed to being accusatory. With Bayard, it's so simple, but I think it's something that I think that we wrote it. I wrote it in 2013 when it was set up at another place, and then in around 2019, it went on to Netflix, and George and Lance worked on it, and this was the right time. Who knew? This was the right time for the film to come out. Bayard's message is just as relevant today as it was, in 1963.
Amen. Julian Breece, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a
And
pleasure.
thank you for the film. And what are you working on now? What can we look forward to next from you?
Well, so I finished the screenplay for Ailey. It's the Life of Alan Ailey.
Ah,
Which I'm so excited about, and Barry Jenkins directing that. And I am, and actually I'm working now on with Lee Daniels, the Sammy Davis Jr. limited series for Hulu that I'm really excited about. Yeah.
fantastic.
After that, I'm going to write a rom-com, like,
Well, as a former dancer, I'm very looking forward now to that Ailey project.
Nice.
Oh, that's very exciting to hear.
Nice.
Julian, thanks again.
Thank you, Dan. Have a good one. Bye.
You too.